Welcome to SAS, short and sweet tips for the business sector from the Case Mastermind group.
So over the course of my time, beginning in sales, but then looking at how salespeople worked, I evolved an approach which worked better on me. There are a few salespeople who worked with me selling to me, and I could recognize the distinction between those who were traditionally trained and those who had much more emphasis on creating bonding and rapport. And by that, I mean setting themselves up as a proper partner in the process. And I guess what stimulates me and gets me out of bed each morning and makes me kind of do what I do is I think more people should know how to sell that way for two reasons. Ultimately, they will be more successful, and I'll tell you why. But the main thing is it takes stress out of it. If you can have a proper rapport as an equal partner in the process right from the get-go, then the conversation changes. And that conversation can more quickly end up in a no, which is good, by the way. A no is good. You don't want to have your time wasted, and actually you don't want to waste your prospects' time either. So more quickly there, and therefore qualify people out of the process. Or if they're qualified in, you get more sensibly to the kind of conclusion that can benefit both sides. So as a result of that, you sell more. Because effectively, by qualifying the poor ones out of the process, you've got more time to spend on those that are more likely to convert. So it's less stressful. You don't have to do a performing seal act. You don't have to fake high energy. In some cases, it's not fake, but in many cases, let's really go for this. It's all slightly kind of foreign and kind of rather awkward. Actually, just be normal. You've got a product. That product may or may not be right for your prospect, but actually let's have a conversation about it. And do you know what? If it's not right, it's not a problem. I'll move on. There are plenty more prospects and you don't want me wasting your time. And that's what I train now. And it's what I fundamentally believe anyway. And I think most people, when they get it, it kind of changes their worldview of sales quite dramatically. Many people take months, if not years, fully to come back to that position. But when they get it and they see the results on their income and the results on their whole stress level for the positive, then it's very rewarding to me.
Yeah, sure. Okay. And is there a name for this technique?
Well, the franchise that I bought about a year ago was the one that, for me, encapsulated this philosophy of sales and goes much more into the psychology of how this relationship works, and that's called Sandler. And if you were to Google Sandler, you'd find it's a worldwide franchise operating in 40 odd countries, and it's been around for about 30-40 years. I just wish I'd had that kind of structure in place for my own career development all those years ago, but we've kind of come together later on, and it works for me.
Sure. Okay, no, that's fantastic. So please carry on sharing.
Okay. So I guess, having set up what I call the traditional approach, and I mean downright rude about it, I should kind of withdraw a little bit and say, as we're having this podcast, there are millions of salespeople out there using that system, and there are billions, if not trillions, of pounds and dollars worth of sales being generated that way. My beef is not that it doesn't work, it does. My beef is it's hard work on both sides, and actually, although the client feels they're in control of the process because they know the salesman's system by now, it's pretty ancient. Actually, at the end of it, the client doesn't actually listen that carefully to the salesman, and as a result doesn't necessarily get the right solution for themselves. And so to me, it's hard work and not as effective for both parties as it should be. What's the alternative? Well, the alternative that I would argue, and frankly, it doesn't matter if there are 100 people listening to this podcast, if only one of them finds this interesting, it's worth you and I talking, Patrick, because frankly, this alternative is not for everybody. Most people will carry on doing it the traditional way. But the alternative is this. It's hard work at the beginning, but easy at the end, and I'll explain. The traditional process I've just talked about is all shiny, as I call it. It's all happy. Patrick, lovely to meet you. Hey, I see that you're interested in fly fishing. I do fly fishing, and we have a nice chat. It's all very nice. And thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. Understand you're interested in widgets. I sell widgets. And let's discuss your needs. Bing, 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 bing. I got widget. Okay, fine. I got exactly the widget for you. Boy, is it good. Not only is it feature plus X, Y, and Z, but it's also A, B, and C, and we can do it at a particular price and delivery is instant. How does that sound to you? Maybe. Not quite sure about the color scheme that you're doing, so on it goes on. It's all happy, clappy stuff. It's all pretty easy kind of stuff. Doesn't challenge the clients, and the salesman does it in a complete patter as he or she is taught. The Sandler person works the difficult bit at the beginning because the traditional sell is difficult at the end, which is the close. It gets to the crunch point, and then I've got to persuade you that actually you want to buy my product. Well, that's the mindset. That's traditional. Hard work, hence all the closes, hence the pressure, and hence largely an awful lot of the time client disappearing because people don't like to be put on pressure like that. Sandler respects the clients. Okay, the first contact, the bonding and rapport is not about fly fishing. The bonding and rapport is about communication styles. You will have an extrovert style, I'll have an introvert style, but I, as the salesperson, need to adapt my communication to you. So I need to be sensitive about the body language, the hidden tells about what your preferred communication styles are, and adapt accordingly. If I walk in as a high I and say, hey, what was your weekend like, Patrick? And you go off, I had a great time fly fishing, we're off. We're all both in the same styles, not a problem. If I walk in and say, hey, what was your weekend like? And you're a high D, you'll say, listen, this is not a meeting about my weekend, all right? Let's get down to brass tacks. So you need to be really sensitive about that. And actually working and understanding people's preferred communication styles is a key part of what we teach. But the difficult bit, because that's not the difficult bit, the difficult bit is to be absolutely prepared, and in fact, even to seek a no. All salespeople are trained to go for the yes. It colors their attitude. They walk in hoping, what I call hopium, hoping for the sale, hoping it'll go right, hoping their product's right, hoping their pricing is right, hoping the competitors were useless. They hope. Lots of optimism, lots of shininess. Sandler person doesn't go in with any expectation, not about him or her. It's not about me if I'm a Sandler salesman. It's only about you, Patrick, as my potential clients. And do you know what I want to do? I want to find out exactly not only what your problem is, but how that problem is affecting you, both in business terms and potentially how it's affecting you personally. If I can understand that, I can begin to start understanding your motivation to fix it. If I can't find that problem, we're not going to sell you anything. If I can, and the motivation is strong enough, then you're more likely to be able to find the money, the resources, the time to be able to fix it, which is also good. And then you're more likely also to make a decision that is positive. But that early discovery is hard work for sales because we're not trained to question to that level of depth. What we're trained to do is seek buying signals, pounce on them and close. And that's easy. It's superficial, doesn't engage the prospect. And the prospect, and this is a Sandler rule, the prospect buys emotionally. Without the emotion, there is no purchase. They justify the purchase intellectually. But the traditional sales model works on intellectual features and benefits, positives, negatives, and all that. So what we do is we take it into the emotional. It's way more difficult. It requires a lot more training. But actually it gets to a much better understanding of the problem. And once you have that, and we'll talk about it in the next section, how you close in that environment, once you have that understanding, then actually you can determine whether you can do something about that problem or not in a perfectly grown-up way. And if you come to the conclusion, doesn't matter how early on, but you need to fairly rapidly, that it's not something you can solve, you you having agreed with your client that it's okay to do this, you say, no, I'm afraid, much as I'd love to give you your solution, I can't. And you walk away. It's a completely different environment.
Yeah, yeah, no, sure. That's very good, Rupert. Very good indeed. I just want to step back very briefly, where you mentioned an I and a D. I know that comes from disc profiling,
Yeah.
but if you could give a very not too in depth, but a very brief synopsis of what the disc profile is, so at least any listeners that are sitting there thinking, what on earth is an I or a D, might understand what they are.
So DISC, D-I-S-C, are the acronyms that make up an assessment of people's natural communication style, the way they interact with the world. And when I say natural, this is something you're born with that almost certainly does not change over the course of your lifetime, but may be affected by extreme trauma, but in most people's case remains consistent throughout their lifestyle, throughout their life. So a D, I won't give any adjectives to describe them because they're too shorthand, but I'll describe what the personality types are. A D type is more direct, deals in the here and now, wants decisions to be done quickly, doesn't suffer fools gladly, can be called blunt by people who are not of a similar predisposition. Understanding, for example, a D, that's their style and it's not rude, it's just the way they do it, is critical, not just the sales process, but, you know, I've had people who've had partnerships for years, and one of my clients had a partner for 4 years, and after I trained him in DISC, he suddenly said, oh, I now understand what this guy's about. Been in business with him for 4 years. So D's are pretty easy to read, you know, short, sharp to the point. I's, and I'm an I, are very easy to read as well. They tend to use about 300 words where 10 will do. They tend to be more sociable. They are the ones who ask about the weekend. They are the ones who do tend to, if there's a party to be organised, the I's are right in the middle of it, sorting it out, whereas the D's can't see the point and don't want to spend the money anyway. The S's of the DISC, the S's tend to be the more team player types, and in most people's DISC profiles, they have a mixture, not always, but a mixture of two, a primary and a secondary style. So my profile is I with a secondary S. So they tend to be people who are more concerned about team dynamics. They're more concerned about the people around them. They work hard to make sure there's consensus in it. They tend, I guess, and I hate using labels like this, they tend to care about people's feelings, whereas D's give the distinct impression they don't care at all sometimes. And then finally there is the C, as in the last letter of DISC. And the C's tend to be, they're more focused. They tend to be more analytical. They tend to want to know how things work in fine detail. And so you can think of roles that people play that are more suited to that. You would, if you walked into your accountant's office and found that his newly appointed partner was a high I, you'd probably worry about whether your money was in safe hands, because he'd probably go and use it to a trip for the boys to Malaga or something like that, because it's fun. No, you want to see these. So these are communication styles. That's all. I'm not talking about your character per se, but it's how you interact with the world, and understanding that. And there's a lot more. That's really at surface level. But you did want a kind of short summary. There's a lot more about how people absorb information, how they take information, how they find it comfortable or not. And I'll give you one analogy to try and explain it. If I asked you to write your signature, let me assume you're right-handed, you'd pick up the pen and you would write right-handed. That's the one that you typically use. It's not that you can't pick up the pen left-handed and sign, but it would take you a lot more effort and it wouldn't be as good, okay? You might be able to practice it, okay? So when a D has to change his or her style to, say, being an I, they can do it, and they sometimes do it very successfully. If you think about quite driven business leaders who actually do get on the stage and they do perform, but it's against type. It drains their energy. The I would have no problem, be easy as peasy, but it really drains a D's agent's energy to behave like that. So if you think of a sales environment, any kind of relationship environment, if you're talking to someone, you're talking in a way which drains the other person's energy. That is not a good start. If they're having to adapt and adjust to you against their type, then you're going to struggle. And that's where the kind of rapport thing begins to break down. And this can happen in marriages, it can happen in partnerships, happen in anything. Being aware of that's it's not manipulative. You're not trying to kid anyone. You're just being sensitive to somebody else's language, as it were. Just being able to communicate. So there you go.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for explaining that, Rupert. That's well explained.
Not at all. Sorry about the jargon.
It's all got its part and place, which is great. So I think when I once heard someone speak about, which is basically the different personality types, isn't it? And a high I, if you got on a plane and was sitting down ready to take off at the airport, if the pilot come on and was a high I, so I said, "Oh, hello everyone, I'm so happy to be here today. Let's get on the flight. Oh dear, I don't know if I've done all the checks yet," and ran into the cockpit, you'd be wishing they were a bit of a C and very focused on what they were doing.
And you're right, Patrick. He may well be an I. His natural style will be an I, but he needs to be adapted to that environment to come across as the kind of completely controlled, methodical professional, because that's who you want flying the plane. Not, you don't want the party animal.
Absolutely.
We can all adapt.
Excellent. So what's next on the menu, Rupert?
Right. Well, there is a kind of sequence to this. If we've talked about the traditional model, and we've also talked about how the approach that I believe should be taken, where you're trying to create a partnership discussion and allowing you to identify those discussions which are going nowhere and get out of them quickly, save yourself a lot of time and effort.
Thank you for spending time with us today. This has been brought to you by the Case Mastermind Group. Please be sure to follow us in the links to this message. Please give your real, honest feedback on what you have just heard and share what you enjoyed or liked the best. We really do check the feedback that we receive. Please also share with your friends who you believe could benefit from it, just to show you care. To our listeners, remember, no matter where you are on the mountain of success, let's enjoy the journey together to the top. We will see you there, my friends.